Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to continue on our series of looking at category breakdowns for the upcoming Academy Awards. And so for today's category breakdown, we're taking a deep dive into the Best Editing category. So again, if you haven't seen any videos of this series so far, there is a playlist on my channel, so you can go and click on that. I believe this is probably 8 or 9 videos. We're getting pretty close to the halfway point of the different categories, so make sure you're checking those videos out. But if you haven't seen any of those videos, just a kind of a recap or just to let you know of the breakdown of how we're going to do this, is I'm going to go through each 5 of the nominees. I'm going to name the film, name the editor that's nominated with the film, a couple facts about the editor, and then talk about the film a little bit. And then at the end, I'll give you my personal ranking of each film and my prediction for how I think they're going to rank up and stack up in the Oscar race. And before we get not going into the nominees, I wanted to point out, in my research, I was looking and seeing that all of the editors in this category, they combined for 14 total nominations throughout their career, and they combined for 3 wins. Although you're going to see in a little bit here that there's really kind of one editor here that's carrying a lot of those numbers. So without further ado, let's get into the Best Editing category. The first nominee that we are taking a look at is Anatomy of a Fall. Editor Laurent Senecal. This is Laurent Senecal's first Oscar nomination. Senecal is a French editor who has collaborated with Justine Triet 3 previous times: Cybele in 2019, In Bed with Victoria in 2016, and Des Ombres dans la Maison in 2010. Senecal won Best Editing for Anatomy of a Fall at the European Film Awards, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, and the San Diego Film Critics Society. And first up, before we really kind of start breaking into the category, apologies if my pronunciation of the names and the films there were kind of a little off. Obviously, not very fluent or very knowledgeable in French pronunciation. But looking into Anatomy of a Fall, the biggest thing for me, the biggest reason for me that when I saw the film, why I instantly was like, because when I first saw Anatomy of a Fall, it was big enough. A lot of people were talking about it. There was buzz around the film, and it had the potential to become a kind of an Oscar player. But weren't sure quite back then. But when I was watching an Anatomy of a Fall, there's one scene that happens where instantly my first thought was like, oh, this is like incredible. This film is should get a lot of nominations. It should get a lot of praise. And then I instantly was like, and for this scene, it should at least be nominated for Best Editing, if not win Best Editing. And if you've seen the film, you likely know what scene I'm talking about. It's the courtroom, kind of the courtroom argument scene, if you will. There's obviously a ton of, that doesn't really necessarily narrow it down a whole ton, because there's multiple courtroom scenes. But there's one scene in particular in the film where they're in the courtroom, and the editing, the way that it uses, because they're listening to a tape of an event that has happened, and the way that the editing kind of uses that audio, puts you back into the scene, then you watch the scene, and then there's kind of this hard cut towards this argument. Like, you get so just enveloped and just kind of like sucked into that scene, into that moment, and then all of a sudden just kind of the hard cut of going back to where you are in the courtroom was just such a beautiful, well edited scene. It really raises the tensions, and then it kind of like brings you back to just brings you back to the reality of the situation of what you're in. And it was just one of those scenes where I kind of like my jaw dropped. And if you're able to edit a scene in a way that makes my jaw drop because I'm just so impressed and amazed with the way that it was all put together, for me that instantly becomes one of those scenes where you deserve praise, you deserve a nomination. I'm glad that Anatomy of a Fall did get in here, a nomination here for Best Editing. So my personal ranking of Anatomy of a Fall is first, and my prediction is that it's the runner-up. The next nominee that we're taking a look at is The Holdovers. Editor Kevin Tent. This is Kevin Tent's second Oscar nomination. He was nominated back in 2012 for The Descendants, also directed by Alexander Payne. In addition to The Holdovers and The Descendants, Tent has also edited 6 other Alexander Payne films, including Nebraska, Sideways, and Election. The Holdovers kind of has a unique thing with its editing that not a lot of other films in the Best Picture category do, because The Holdovers, more so than a lot of the other films, maybe there's 2 or 3 others that maybe fit into this kind of genre, but The Holdovers is very much a drama that is also very comedic, and it's one of the films that kind of balances the two sides very well, and the marriage between the comedy and the drama, I think, works the best out of all the Best Picture nominees. I think it works the best in The Holdovers. And so the editing in The Holdovers, you get to do a couple different things with it. You get, the comedic editing, kind of like if you think of the chase scene between Dominic Sessa and Paul Giamatti's characters. So you get the editing that's done in that scene that's done in kind of a comedic way that's done very well, and then obviously you kind of have the aftermath, and then kind of pretty much, I guess really early in the film is where it's kind of more comedic, right before it kind of turns a little more serious toward the end of the film. But you just get a lot of these scenes and these moments early on in the film that are done very well, and the editing adds a lot of kind of levity. It adds a lot of kind of it adds to the humor, right, of those comedic scenes. But then the editing also, especially later in the film, as it kind of turns and kind of matures and slows down a little bit and becomes a little bit more serious toward the in the second half of the film. The editing does a great job of highlighting a lot of kind of the emotional moments, especially for me it's the one scene that just stands out the most to me is the way that the Christmas party scene is edited, especially the shot of cutting back to Paul Giamatti's face for kind of that reaction shot. For me, that's another bit of editing that is just so impressive to me. And so for the Holdovers, I do think it's one of those things where the comedic editing is done really well, as well as kind of more of the dramatic editing. So my personal rank of the Holdovers is going to be fifth, and then my prediction is fourth. The next nominee that we are taking a look at is Killers of the Flower Moon. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker. This is Thelma Schoonmaker's ninth Oscar nomination. She has 3 wins for The Departed in 2007, The Aviator in 2005, and Raging Bull in 1981, all directed by Martin Scorsese. Schoonmaker has collaborated with Martin Scorsese 27 times, ranging from feature films to short films to documentaries to Michael Jackson's Bad music video. And when it comes to the best editing category, there's kind of a debate every single year between, are we nominating the most editing, or is that what we're rewarding, is the editor that had to do the most editing, or are we rewarding the editor who had the flashiest editing, or kind of the most just impressive, kind of seamless, just is that kind of the more nuanced editing that we're nominating? And in that in that respect, Killers of the Flower Moon is the film that has the most editing, right? Obviously, in a film that is 3 hours and 26 minutes long as the official runtime, Killers of the Flower Moon just, it's unarguable that it has the most film that needed to be edited. And so, there is that kind of debate of if that's what the award is, if that's what we're awarding. And I think in the past, sometimes that has been what has gotten the award. It's just whichever film had the most editing, maybe not the most difficult editing, but it's just whatever we're editing the most out of the film, and that's like to get to that final cut. That's what's getting the win. But with the film, and that's not to say that the editing in Killers of the Flower Moon isn't impressive. Obviously, it is. I think for me, the most interesting part of the editing is because there isn't in some other films, and you just think of in the past or even in this category, just other films where it's like there's more action or there's more exciting things that are happening, and so it's editing, it's fast cutting, and this and this and this, and so there's different things of like that's the flashy editing, I guess. Killers of the Flower Moon, it's the more subtle, it's the more back, kind of laid back editing, but it's like conversational editing. It's editing a conversation. A lot of the film is multiple characters talking. I talked about this in the previous video in the cinematography video of like Killers of the Flower Moon has so many scenes with so many characters, kind of the big scenes, and so you're editing back and forth between all these different conversations that are happening, and it's all done very well, and it keeps you engaged and it keeps you interested in the conversations, which is frankly it's something that's maybe said, it's easier said than done to be able to do that. So it's very impressive editing when it's done that way. And then especially toward the end, I don't want to get into too much spoilers, but there is kind of a moment in the courtroom scene where, again, you're talking about the conversational editing of kind of bouncing around from character to character. There's one scene toward the end of the film where the editing choice was made to just stay on one character for a long period of time, and for me that was really impressive, and it was really well done. A really impressive editing feat. So my personal ranking of Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm putting this in third, and my prediction is also going to be in third. The next nominee that we are taking a look at is Oppenheimer. Editor Jennifer Lame. This is Jennifer Lame's first Oscar nomination. Oppenheimer is Lame's second collaboration with Christopher Nolan, following Tenet in 2020. Other recent films edited by Lame include Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Marriage Story, and Hereditary. And much like Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer is like the second most the film that has the second most just film to edit, right? Obviously Oppenheimer, I believe it's an even 3 hours, I think, so it's the second longest, runtime here in this category. And it's so obviously it's one of those things where the editing, there's just a lot of film to edit, so that's one of those things where if that's the way you lean in that debate, if you're just awarding the film that has the most editing, Oppenheimer obviously could be your choice there in that category. But Oppenheimer also has very flashy editing too, in a way that was like kind of surprising to me. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, going into a Christopher Nolan film. Obviously, you're going to expect kind of a lot of the technical stuff to be well done. But I was just kind of surprised by how kind of quick and engaging the editing choices are in Oppenheimer. And there's one scene in particular that I think, if you've seen the film, you probably know what scene I'm talking about. It's kind of the spy scene where Robert Downey Jr.'s character is talking to Christopher Nolan. They're at that table, and they're discussing about there being a mole or there being a spy inside Los Alamos. And I think the editing is done so well in that scene that, again, this scene, like, if you're on Twitter, this scene was very kind of viral. It went big on Twitter because a lot of people were just like, that scene was the moment that everyone decided they loved Oppenheimer. And that scene is so impressive that I think in big part of it because of the editing. But I think the editing is so good that I think that one scene, because of how good the editing is, almost secured 3 Oscar wins for the film. Because A, the editing was so good, it's going to get an editing Oscar. B, the film is edited to the score so well that obviously the score by Ludwig Göransson is obviously already really impressive. But then when it's edited so well to the film, when it's just like you're watching a scene and the cuts are happening as the music's playing and it's edited together so beautifully, obviously that enhances the score. So I think that in that one scene you get the editing is beautiful, the score is beautiful, and then Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in that scene is so good that I think that was kind of the scene that, up until that point, Robert Downey Jr. was really good, but that was kind of one of his first scenes where it's like, oh, this is like Robert Downey Jr. in kind of a level that we haven't seen for a while, as he's kind of been stuck in his Iron Man phase. And so I think it's when you can have one scene that's done so well, mainly because of the editing, that it's gonna win your film at least 3 Oscars, then clearly it's a very impressive feat and something that the Academy is clearly going to award. So my personal ranking for Oppenheimer, I'm putting this in second, but like I was saying, I'm predicting this to win. And the final nominee that we're taking a look at is Poor Things. Editor Yorgos Mavropsaridis. This is Yorgos Mavropsaridis' second Oscar nomination. He was nominated in 2019 for The Favorite, also directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Yorgos Mavropsaridis and Yorgos Lanthimos have collaborated 11 times, and the 12th upcoming collaboration is happening this year with Kinds of Kindness. And so much like the previous 2 nominees of Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer, Poor Things is another one of those films, a longer film that had a lot to edit. I was reading kind of an interview with the editor where he was mentioning and he was pointing out that the original cut for Poor Things was a little over 4 hours long. And so obviously this is potentially the film that kind of had the most to cut. Because, I mean, you hear stories about like Scorsese and Nolan and other directors where like everything they wanted to shoot, they shot. And so there isn't necessarily a whole ton of scenes that are getting kind of getting left on the cutting room floor. But for Poor Things, it does sound like that was kind of the case where, again, over 4 hours long, a lot of scenes just completely cut altogether. But then in the interview, he was also mentioning that there was a lot of scenes where it wasn't necessarily improv. It wasn't necessarily that they were just letting Emma Stone or any of the actors in the scenes just kind of improv and do whatever they wanted to do. But the scenes were written very long, and there was a lot going on. And then once they filmed those scenes, then they would trim each of the scenes down to kind of whatever the necessary, parts of the film were, whatever the necessary things were to, to keep the story moving along. And so again, so just in that sense of just how much had to be edited. It's impressive work for Poor Things, but the editing also does a great job of showcasing Bella Baxter, Emma Stone's character, just kind of on her journey as she's exploring the world, and the way that the editing is used as kind of a tool to just kind of enhance the coming of age story, to enhance her growth. It's kind of a tool that is just used in effect with everything else that's going on in Poor Things, especially in the second half of the film. That as she is kind of getting going from continent to continent, as she is just kind of continuing to explore the world and to just kind of explore who she is, and what her purpose is, and who she's trying to become, the person she wants to become. The editing is a great tool in that sense of kind of cutting the scenes together, and leading the charge of this journey for Bella Baxter. So my personal ranking for Poor Things is fourth, and my prediction is fifth. And that's it. That's the best editing category. So let me know down below in the comments what films you're rooting for in this category, or let me know as well what films you think should have gotten a nomination that didn't. And as always, let me know in the comments below as well what categories you'd like to see me do next, and also let me know if there's any films in this category that you think should have got an editing nomination that ultimately didn't. So yeah, just let me know in the comments. I'll read all of those, and again, look forward to discussing more category breakdowns with you. Obviously, we're, I guess at this point, just under 3 weeks away from the Academy Awards. So, like you've kind of been noticing, you're going to continue to see this kind of trend, this uptrend of me just kind of pumping out a lot more content and putting almost nearly daily videos out. So, again, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more of those videos. So, thank you for watching and have a great day.